Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
Did you know that back in the year 2000, during the height of the dot-com bubble, Netflix offered to sell itself to the Blockbuster video store chain for $50 million? Blockbuster CEO John Antioco, in possibly one of the biggest business blunders of all time, laughed at the idea of buying Netflix, which at that point was just a small DVD by mail service. But it was on the cusp of becoming the leading video streaming service. Changed the game. Blockbuster, of course, went bankrupt just a decade later in 2010. Today, Netflix is a $440 billion company and is trying to dramatically shake up the future of the Hollywood establishment, offering more than $70 billion to buy Warner Brothers Discovery. It's a friendly deal. Warner's executives have agreed to it, but it sent shockwaves through the industry. But wait, there's even more drama in the script, with Paramount Skydance offering more than $100 billion to buy Warner in a hostile takeover attempt. Oh, and like everything else in America these days, there's a political angle as well. Welcome to The Big Story. My name is Mike Eppel. To talk about the Hollywood intrigue of all of these wheelings and dealings and everything else that's going on with this Netflix bid, we're talking to Professor Paul Moore in the Department of Sociology at Toronto Metropolitan University. Morning, Professor. Thanks for joining me.
Morning, Mike. I'd forgotten to link Blockbuster into this whole story, and I focus on the history of movie theaters and movie going, but streaming has its origins in going to the rental, and just think of all that wasted time browsing the shelves.
Or at the time it was kind of culturally significant, because how many Fridays did we actually spend there just looking at first VHS tapes and then subsequently DVDs, trying to figure out what we were going to watch, as opposed to today's environment where you scan Netflix and just kind of look at the titles and then really never decide what you're going to watch.
Well, I think that's where I'm going to take you up on where you started. I think Netflix is sort of like a digital version of Blockbuster Video. You know, you browse through the options, you choose what you want to see. Although it has television, though, I think the distinction between movies and television being more important than ever. You know, Netflix, if there's one thing it hasn't succeeded in doing as it became a technology company, it's kind of get rid of the distinction between a movie you watch for a couple of hours and it's over, and a television show that you watch periodically or you binge, or, episodic TV. So we've still got that important distinction between like reading a novel and reading the next issue of a magazine, if you want to kind of put it in that way, between television and movies. And Netflix hasn't just kind of devolved into like endless streaming of random things. It's still important that you're choosing what you want to see, even when you're watching a movie. It's not that much different from walking up to a box office and deciding what movie you want to see. So there's a lot going on there that makes it different from streaming social media still to this day. And that's kind of the starting point for thinking about why this matters for Hollywood, and why this might even matter for Canadian subscribers and Canadian audiences too.
Well, from Netflix's standpoint, I mean, they've kind of paid lip service to the idea of continuing the theater-going experience by, in its attempt to buy Warner Brothers, which is, a 110-year-old company. It is the one of the best-known names in Hollywood, and its business is about the theater, really, going to movies, which is it's a bit of an effort. Let's face it. It's a choice. You're not just, you have to decide what you're going to spend a lot of money on these days to go and sit in a theater. But at the end of the day, Netflix really wants this for content and get more people subscribing, right? I mean, they are planning, if this goes through, to really change the game when we're talking about all those standalone theater operators.
Well, Netflix has for 10 or 15 years been really against movie theaters specifically. They occasionally make a movie that they want to win Best Oscar, that they want nominated for Oscars, and they'll put that in movie theaters really briefly, or they'll make a deal with a director in order to kind of have their movie briefly in theaters. Like right now, um, the Knives Out mystery is in theaters before it goes to Netflix. But Netflix, you're right, has been against the traditional Hollywood idea of movies first and at movie theaters first. Ted Sarandos, Netflix CEO, has really been disdainful of the big American chains and Cineplex here in Canada, and they've refused to deal with them. So Netflix bidding for Warner, Warner's one of only five big American Hollywood movie studios. It's one of the biggest, and it's had a really successful year this year with a lot of hits and two Best Picture contenders coming up. But Netflix's bid for Warner is important for Hollywood because they're promising, for whatever a promise is worth for a tech company, they're promising to keep the Warner Studio brand and to keep releasing Warner branded movies in movie theaters first. So they're almost kind of giving in their bid for Warner to the idea that certain kinds of movies should first appear in movie theaters, and they're going to brand those Warner movies, and they're going to maybe keep a separate stream of certain kinds of premium content on their HBO Plus kind of streamer. And the ordinary, everyday, available at home things will be Netflix. And I'm reading a lot into the numbers here, but at least they're promising to keep the movie studio a fifth movie studio, and to keep the idea of going to the movies a really special thing that's important to Hollywood, and kind of keep a separation between going to the movies and streaming.
So a couple of things I wanted to unpack there. You mentioned
Yeah.
earlier about the idea of Netflix actually putting a couple of movies in theaters for Oscar buzz. I mean, that's kind of the whole, idea of Hollywood. The movie premieres, the big events to garner attention for potential Oscar winners, the starlets, the actors, everybody getting out and, putting on their finest on the red carpet. Not really something Netflix has done, per se, but, when these big movies come out, it's a cultural talking point the day of and going forward and leading up to the award season. So does Netflix want to continue that, or again, are they just kind of saying, yeah, we'll do that, Hollywood, but at the end of the day, maybe not so much?
Well, when Netflix makes a film with Martin Scorsese, or when they make like Roma was their big Oscar nominee several years ago. Here in Toronto, it plays at TIFF. TIFF Lightbox are the only players that make that deal to play those Netflix films here in Toronto. Because Cineplex is kind of has a stance where if you're not going to give us an exclusive window with your streamer, we're not going to do it. But that Oscar buzz, that kind of ritzy glamour Hollywood, the idea of a premiere that you can only see at a theater. In fact, the idea of going to a theater and sitting in the dark with 100 strangers, with 1,000 strangers, like, come on, Mike, that is old-fashioned. We have nostalgia for that. But when is the last time we actually did that? Well, I do actually do it, 3 or 4 times a year for those Oscar films. That's true. But those films that Netflix puts in theaters for 1 or 2 weeks, they just don't have the same audience as they get when they are successful on streaming. And So it's interesting with this deal that they're almost admitting that they don't know how to do movie theater releases, first run releases. They've set up some bad blood with the movie chains in Hollywood and Canada. And one way back into kind of a reset button with Hollywood is to take Warner and make it their theatrical brand and show almost as a sign of respect. This is the hopeful, optimistic version of the Netflix bid. Take the Warner brand and show it as a kind of respect for the tradition and nostalgia of Hollywood. They haven't done anything even remotely like that before. They've even been hostile and contemptuous of the idea of movie theaters in the past. And Warner, on the other hand, right now, this year, Warner has the top contender for the Best Picture Oscar with the P.T. Anderson's One Battle After Another with Leonardo DiCaprio. But also even the Weapons movie, which was a big hit for them, has some Oscar buzz because of its innovative script and that. And Sinners, from back in the winter, Sinners was the kind of art horror black culture film from Ryan Coogler, director of Black Panther. So like Warner is where all the buzz is for the Oscar season, going into Oscar season. It's interesting to see Netflix kind of go for that and go for broke, trying to put that into a parallel with their streaming model.
Well, you could also argue that Netflix has really built its success or attention on the series, binge watching series. You've got Stranger Things out there right now, Squid Game, all these other things. Not so much movies, but more almost like the HBO model of television series.
Netflix really going all in on like you said, on series, on streaming. The idea of binging comes from Netflix. The whole idea of letting it play not just once a week HBO style, but launching them all at once. Like they changed how we watch television far more than they changed how we watched movies. Movies continue to come and go, and there's a crisis in the movie industry right now, and it's unclear what kinds of things we'll keep going to movie theaters to see in the future. Now that kind of the Marvel superhero movies have slipped a little bit and aren't as popular anymore, but the idea of streaming, binging a series and not just waiting for it once a week, like Prestige TV, absolutely Netflix fundamentally changed how we sit at home and watch TV. But this bid for Warner's is almost like they're saying, we still respect that movies are a little different.
Well, you mentioned the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Part of the assets of Warner Brothers Discovery would be DC Comics. So, I mean, that's just another facet to this. I want to talk, though, about the immediate pushback, not just from Hollywood writers and the movie theater industry, also came from critics who would say this gives Netflix way too much power from a competitive standpoint. And of course, who did we hear from? The U.S. President Donald Trump saying, "Oh, the numbers, competition, and he'll look into it. He would have some say in this." I mean, that's the political angle, and we'll get to that in a second. But from a combination of these two companies, will the regulators say, "Nope, that's just too much concentration"?
Well, again, it's the concentration that would happen from Netflix buying Warner is on the streaming side, is the fact that HBO comes with it. That is really important. It's it's maybe even more important in Canada than in the US. But that is the fear, and that is the opening, as you indicated, for President Trump to have his hand out saying, okay, now what's in it for me, as if he directly controls what's going to happen in the competition and antitrust investigations in the States. And the fact is, he does. He's not wrong. But far be it for me to kind of think where that might go. As we know from the news, it's the competing bid from Paramount where Jared Kushner literally has his hands in, and where the Trump family has a direct conflict of interest. And no surprise, Trump has said, oh, you don't want Netflix to get too big. I'm paraphrasing. But on the other hand, maybe the Paramount bid looks good. And we know that Trump's already had a deal, like a personal almost deal, with Paramount over its CBS News controversy. In order for the Paramount takeover by the Ellison family, by David Ellison, to happen, Trump had his fingers all in that and got concessions and personal payments in order to drop libel lawsuits against 60 Minutes and CBS News. So, but it does bring up, kind of you bringing up President Trump, it brings up what would be consolidated in the hostile bid from Ellison and Paramount, is that would be more likely to end up collapsing Paramount and Warner into one consolidated movie studio. And in fact, that's part of the Paramount bid, is to get rid of all the Hollywood synergies and really create Paramount Warner as one movie studio.
Yeah, just to go back through the whole
gosh
of Skydance over to Paramount. That was backed by, like I say, David Ellison. Larry Ellison's his dad, who of Oracle fame, who recently was the world's richest individual. So they've got lots of money. They immediately made changes at CBS, like you said. And if they take control of the CNN assets of Warner Brothers Discovery, then that adds to some other angles to this. Interestingly, the Netflix bid for Warner would see CNN, TBS, and TNT all spun off into a separate entity and kind of keep it out of the political political angle, I suppose, for lack of a better description. So, like, each bid comes with various pitfalls and intrigue, don't they?
Well, they're apples and oranges bids, absolutely. And at one thing, they're not bidding on the same assets of Warner Discovery. Just to kind of repeat what you explained there a little bit, a big part of Warner Discovery is the cable television, linear TV assets. And so that's the linear HBO, but also CNN, Discovery channels in the US, the Food Network, and HGTV, and a bunch of other streaming channels. Now, it's acknowledged generally in the media environment that those are not dead assets, but there's no room for growth there. So the plan that Netflix pitched is to leave behind those linear cable TV assets and only take the streaming and the Hollywood production. So they're going for content, in other words. And the assets of cable TV that don't really have much room for growth, they're going to leave behind. And someone will take those and kind of reap them for the little bit of profit that's left until they go away. I mean, what's really, we started this interview talking about Blockbuster home rental videos. What's really the next thing to fall away is actually not movie going, but cable TV.
When Paramount Skydance and the Ellisons say Warner Brothers Discovery shareholders are going to get $30 a share as opposed to $26, it's kind of tough to compare the two because they're not exactly the same asset base that you're looking at.
Well, and you have to kind of read the tea leaves for the future of how much will they get in the future for just the cable TV part of it. Like, is someone actually going to come in and buy the CNN and the cable TV for at least $20 billion at some point in 3 or 4 years? Possibly. It's not out of the question. But that's why, these bids are canny, because it's a true hostile takeover bid, undermining the Netflix bid, because they're not bidding on the same assets. They're not bidding on the same future plan. Their financial backers are coming from totally different places. They're because it's a hostile bid, they're actually going direct to shareholders, Paramount and Ellison is, rather than dealing with the board. So we've got a situation here that's, I'm joking, but it's almost a perfect situation for the wild card of the whims of Trump to literally be the trump card that decides where the real profit and where the real future of media is going to be here. It's almost a joke. You could turn this into like a parody version of Succession or something like that.
There's also been another theory that Netflix is only doing this to kind of push Warner Brothers to the sidelines for a year or two, tie this whole thing up in regulatory and court fights, that the Warner Studios won't be able to produce as much content, also HBO, and therefore grow Netflix's business just because they have more content to offer up to subscribers. Is that? I mean, and that's just one idea, but regardless, this is going to take a long time to get sorted out. You're going to have shareholder fights and pushbacks and possibly lawsuits and all these other things that are going to drag this thing on.
Well, it's a ripe field for conspiracy theories, and for just not even conspiracy theories, for simply pessimistically imagining the negative outcomes. It is absolutely true that neither of these deals can you really trust on the surface for what they're saying they're planning on doing as being anything more than their starting point. And what happens long run is, almost completely up in the air, even if you tried to put aside the idea of ulterior motives. But there are so many ulterior motives. It's hard to imagine Netflix losing in this situation. It's almost like a win-win for them. Even if they don't get Warner, they get the instability of this competing producer and this competing, they're kind of undermining HBO and undermining Warner Studios while they continue to grow their influence. And that's, even at face value, thinking that they really do want it. Even if they lose, they win by making it unstable on the other side. And on the other hand, the Paramount bid, the Ellison bid, is completely dependent, financially dependent on saving economies of scale by basically laying off every duplicated person. So the someone I was listening to on was saying, even down at the level of craft services and technicians down on the ground, like if someone's doing it at Paramount and they're also doing it at Warner, they're not going to keep both people. So reading in between the lines of where this is going, what's most interesting to me, thinking bigger picture, is it's movies are not going away, and going to the movies at movie theaters is not going away. Some version of that, whether it be Warner, Paramount together, or Warner as a brand of Netflix, is actually going to be supported by whatever the outcome of this merger is. But the other thing that's going to happen is the consolidation of the industry, and streaming is just going to, consolidate one way or the other. It's simply we're heading into a time of media mergers where there's just a lot less competition for big mainstream media. And also on the political side of it too, there's a lot less competition for the idea of news and media as the watchdog of the politics.
I got to leave it there. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Mike. Lots of fun talking about this.
All right. Take care. That was Professor Paul Moore from Toronto Metropolitan University. You've been listening to The Big Story. You can send us feedback on this episode or any other episode by emailing us at hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca or leave us a voicemail at 416-935-5935. We welcome your feedback. Please share, rate, and review this episode. And you can find back episodes on the Seeker app or on all of your favorite podcast players. I'm Mike Eppel. Thanks for listening.